In the early 90s, the gaming world was thriving with innovations, but few titles shook the scene quite like Donkey Kong Country. Released in November 1994 for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, this game redefined what we thought 16-bit systems could do. Developed by Rare and published by Nintendo, Donkey Kong Country wasn't just another platformer, it was a revolution in both graphics and gameplay, marking a key moment in retro gaming history. By the time this game hit store shelves, Donkey Kong was already an iconic character, having made his first appearance in arcades in 1981. But with Donkey Kong Country, this barrel-tossing gorilla evolved from a villain in Mario's world to a bona fide hero of his own. It wasn't long before Donkey Kong Country became a must-have title for the Super Nintendo, contributing to the system's staying power in the mid-90s. By blending incredible graphics with fast, satisfying platforming, Rare had crafted a game that wasn't just about jumping on enemies and grabbing bananas. It was a full-on adventure that drew players in and kept them coming back for more. Donkey Kong Country became a bestseller, moving over 9 million copies, making it one of the best-selling Super Nintendo games of all time. Not only did it revive Donkey Kong as a character, but it also cemented Rare's reputation as one of the premier developers of the era. This game's success had far-reaching effects on the industry as well. It proved that 2D platformers still had a place in a gaming world that was beginning to see the rise of 3D experiences. It also demonstrated the importance of pushing the technical boundaries of a system to create something truly memorable. Donkey Kong Country was a perfect storm, a game that looked amazing, played beautifully, and left a lasting legacy that continues to influence the world of gaming to this day. At its core, Donkey Kong Country might seem like a simple platformer, but the story behind the game adds layers of charm and character that make it unforgettable. Set on the lush and vibrant Donkey Kong Island, the plot revolves around Donkey Kong, a hero who's far more than just an arcade antagonist throwing barrels at Mario. This time, he's got a mission of his own, one that's surprisingly personal: to reclaim his beloved banana horde. The story kicks off when King K. Rool, the menacing leader of the Kremlings, and his scaly henchmen sneak into Donkey Kong's jungle home in the dead of night. Their goal? To swipe Donkey Kong's entire stash of bananas. Teaming up with Donkey Kong on this quest is his nephew, Diddy Kong, an agile, smaller ape who's eager to prove himself. Together, the duo embarks on an adventure across the island, spanning jungles, mines, coral reefs, snowy mountains, and industrial factories, all teeming with enemies, traps, and secrets. While the plot may seem straightforward, Rare injected it with plenty of personality. Donkey Kong is the strong, determined hero, while Diddy is the spry, plucky sidekick always looking to prove that he can hold his own in a fight. What's brilliant about the story of Donkey Kong Country is how seamlessly it fits with the gameplay and world design. The levels reflect the narrative of reclaiming DK Island from K. Rool's clutches. This environmental storytelling, combined with the character-driven plot, makes the stakes feel real, even though the premise remains lighthearted and fun. The simplicity of Donkey Kong Country's story is one of its strengths. It doesn't bog players down with complex lore or dialogue-heavy cutscenes. Instead, it sets the stage perfectly for an adventure that anyone can jump into. When it comes to Donkey Kong Country, the gameplay is where the magic really happens. At its core, this is a 2D platformer, but Rare didn't just follow the typical formula of the genre. They infused the game with fast-paced action, fluid character controls, and plenty of variety that made every level feel like its own mini-adventure. The controls are tight, responsive, and easy to pick up, but mastering the game takes real skill. You control two characters, Donkey Kong and his speedy sidekick, Diddy Kong. The ability to switch between the two characters adds a layer of strategy to the game. Learning when to use each character is key, especially in the later levels where the difficulty ramps up. One of the standout gameplay mechanics in Donkey Kong Country is the buddy system. If either Donkey or Diddy gets hit by an enemy, they'll be knocked out, leaving the remaining character to carry on solo until you find a DK barrel to revive your partner. This mechanic keeps players on edge, knowing that one hit could cost them a valuable teammate. The level design is a big part of what makes Donkey Kong Country so engaging. Rare designed each stage with an impressive amount of variety, ensuring that no two levels ever feel the same. From lush jungle platforms to snow-covered peaks and treacherous caves, each environment comes with its own set of challenges. Another iconic gameplay element is the animal buddies. Scattered throughout the levels, you'll find crates that contain helpful animal companions. Rambi the rhino, for instance, lets you charge through enemies and break obstacles with ease, while Enguarde the swordfish allows you to traverse underwater levels with speed and grace, making those sections far less cumbersome than in other platformers. Of course, no discussion of the gameplay would be complete without mentioning the minecart levels, some of the most thrilling and nerve-wracking stages in the game. In these sections, you hop into a speeding minecart and hurtle down tracks, dodging obstacles, jumping over gaps, and trying to stay on course. These levels are fast, intense, and a true test of reflexes. Players who conquered them back in the day wear it like a badge of honor because the slightest misstep could send you flying off the tracks to your doom. The difficulty curve in Donkey Kong Country is finely tuned. Early levels ease you in, giving you a chance to get used to the controls and mechanics. But by the time you're halfway through the game, the challenges ramp up significantly. Levels become more complex, with trickier platforming sections, tougher enemies, and more elaborate boss battles. The gameplay of Donkey Kong Country is a masterclass in platforming design. It's challenging, rewarding, and full of variety, keeping players engaged with each new level. The combination of tight controls, clever level design, and dynamic character switching makes Donkey Kong Country one of the most well-crafted games of its time. When Donkey Kong Country hit the scene in 1994, it wasn't just the gameplay that wowed players. It was the jaw-dropping graphics and mesmerizing sound design that made it stand out. In many ways, Donkey Kong Country set a new standard for what was possible on a home console, leaving players and critics alike stunned at how much the game achieved on the hardware. Donkey Kong Country was unlike anything players had ever seen on the Super Nintendo. Using a process called advanced computer modeling, Rare pre-rendered 3D models and then converted them into 2D sprites, giving the game a pseudo-3D look that blew minds in the mid-90s. The characters, environments, and animations all had a level of detail that seemed impossible on the Super Nintendo. Donkey Kong himself wasn't just a collection of flat pixels. He had texture, shading, and weight that made him look like he could leap off the screen at any moment. The environments are what really shine, though. Every level of Donkey Kong Country feels like its own richly detailed world, packed with visual variety. The game takes you from dense jungle canopies to underwater coral reefs, from snow-capped mountains to abandoned industrial factories. The amount of detail and atmosphere in each world is staggering. It wasn't just the visuals that helped Donkey Kong Country stand out, it was the sound design that completed the experience. The game's soundtrack, composed by David Wise, has gone down in gaming history as one of the best ever created. The soundtrack is a masterclass in atmosphere. Each track not only fits the theme of the level but also enhances the emotional impact of the gameplay. Take Aquatic Ambiance, for example. This tranquil, almost ethereal piece plays during the underwater levels and perfectly captures the serene beauty of the ocean, while also maintaining a subtle sense of danger lurking beneath the surface. Rare's attention to detail in the sound and graphics helped elevate Donkey Kong Country far beyond a simple platformer. They took full advantage of the Super Nintendo's sound chip to create a rich, atmospheric audio experience that still holds up today. When Donkey Kong Country first launched in 1994, few could have predicted just how influential it would become. First and foremost, Donkey Kong Country redefined what the Super Nintendo was capable of. At the time of its release, many players believed that the 16-bit era had reached its peak. Systems like the Sony PlayStation and Sega Saturn were on the horizon, promising the new frontier of 3D gaming, and there was a sense that 2D platformers might become a thing of the past. But Donkey Kong Country shattered those expectations. The game's success wasn't just measured in graphical prowess, though. Donkey Kong Country sold over 9 million copies worldwide, making it the third best-selling Super Nintendo game of all time. trailing only Super Mario World and Super Mario All-Stars. It wasn't just a commercial juggernaut, it became a cultural phenomenon. Donkey Kong was back in the spotlight, and this time he was here to stay. Rare's success with Donkey Kong Country also marked the beginning of a legendary partnership with Nintendo. Following this game, Rare would go on to develop Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Kong Quest, and Donkey Kong Country 3, Dixie Kong's Double Trouble, both of which refined and expanded on the original formula, keeping the series at the forefront of platforming excellence. Rare's later work on the Nintendo 64, including Banjo-Kazooie, GoldenEye, and Conker's Bad Fur Day, continued to build on the innovation and polish they had pioneered with Donkey Kong Country. The company's ability to push hardware to its limits became one of their trademarks, and it all started with DK's banana hoarding adventure. Beyond just the gameplay and visuals, Donkey Kong Country also left a deep emotional mark on players. For many who grew up in the 90s, it was a defining game of their childhood, a gateway into the larger world of video games. Donkey Kong Country is more than just a standout Super Nintendo game. It's a cornerstone of gaming history. Its influence can be seen in the technical advancements of its era, the evolution of platformers, and the enduring popularity of Donkey Kong as a character. As long as people continue to revisit the 16-bit era, Donkey Kong Country will always be remembered as a game that helped shape the future of gaming, while reminding us why we fell in love with video games in the first place.